For decades, nuclear weapons were like a dark legend. Public saw it as symbol of ultimate destruction. They seemed distant and, frankly speaking, a bit abstract. But then, something changed. I'm Alina, and this is a new episode of The Motion podcast, where we discuss geopolitical shifts and trends. In recent years, nuclear threats have started to sound more and more serious. Take, for example, North Korean, Russian, Iranian, United States and Israeli officials, who appear on the news with claims which sound on the edge of sarcastic jokes and real war declarations.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
One of the weapons China demonstrated contained 60 nuclear warheads plus one hydrogen bomb.
The case that I've been pushing is the use of an electromagnetic pulse weapon or weapons against Iran.
We will use all the means in our disposal. This is not a bluff.
If you've been following Russian political discourse since the war in Ukraine, you've definitely noticed talks of red lines, nuclear readiness, and strategic strikes. Today, we are going to look into how the Kremlin uses nuclear rhetoric. Why do they keep bringing it up? And most importantly, what does this constant doomsday talk actually do to people living inside Russia? First, let's talk strategy. Vladimir Putin has made nuclear references a hallmark of his communications since the start of the war. But here is the kicker. Researchers have found that these threats aren't always about military utility. They are actually tools of so-called psychological warfare. Think of it like this. The goal isn't just to deter NATO, it is to shape the mental landscape of the audience. A study analyzing Putin's statements from 2022 to 2025 shows that whenever there's a spike in aggressive nuclear rhetoric, there is an immediate spike in anxiety within Russia. In early 2022, Russian search engines were flooded with queries about nuclear war. People were simply scared. The researchers found that the factual content of the speeches mattered less than the intensity. It was a dramatic, existential tone that kept the public on edge. But here is where it gets really interesting. What happens when you live in a constant state of fear? Obviously, people cannot be in high alert panic forever. And eventually, you just stop following up. This is called desensitization. By 2024, the data showed a shift. Even as the Kremlin introduced more intense rhetoric and even new hardware like Oreshnik missile system, the shock factor began to fade. Fewer people saw nuclear use as absolutely unthinkable. Instead, support for the idea of nuclear force actually went upward. It wasn't that the Russian public suddenly turned into warmongers. It is just that they got used to the conversation. When you talk about the unthinkable every day, it slowly becomes just thinkable. By 2025, researchers actually saw a decline in public interest in nuclear escalation, not because danger was gone, but because of public fatigue. So, where does this leave us? The research paints a pretty clear picture. In Russia, public opinion isn't driving nuclear policy, it is the other way around. The state puts out the narrative, and the society absorbs it. We saw this in 2025 too, when signs of diplomatic thaw emerged, especially with the return of Donald Trump to the US presidency. Putin's tone softened, and the public's optimism immediately rose. It shows that Russian society is just as responsive to signals of peace as it is to signals of war. This reminds us a truth of the digital age. Nuclear weapons today aren't just military hardware, they are also communication tools. Their power lies as much in the headlines they create as in the destruction they could deliver. And the question for us today isn't just will they be used, but also what happens to a society and to the global mindset when the threat of the apocalypse becomes just another part of the daily newsfeed. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this dive into the psychology of power, share this episode and keep asking questions. See you next time.